it's this whole, fear, which leads to more dryness, because, as we know, the biggest sex organ is our brain.
Have you ever had where you're kind of dry down there? And what did you say, Tanya? I can't believe we're going to share this.
So I said yes, and premenstrually. So when the estrogen levels drop just before the period, for sure. And some women will describe it as like dry and scratchy or like sandpaper. And for me, I've always used lubrication first to just kind of make me relax. Like I felt connected to my partner, but I always use a little bit of like silicone lubrication before any kind of physical penetration, because then it gets my mind relaxed, and then I feel like I can produce my own lubrication. And I know some women are like, I would never use lubrication. It's almost like they're embarrassed to say that it's, that they would use it because they produce enough.
Right. Like back to that conversation. It's like, oh, I suck. I don't have enough. And like, I should be able to do this. And it's like, no, like there's this natural shift of hormones when you are a menstruating woman. But then of course the perimenopause and then postmenopausal women, it's like, hello, the estrogen's kind of like gone bye-bye, and like this is a natural course of life. And so there are lots of things that we can do about it, and we're going to talk about it today.
Yeah. So when you are perimenopausal, you might go through periods where there's no period showing up, and then a big flood perhaps 3 months later. So it's kind of all over the place, all the possibilities. And there's more kind of vaginal atrophy, we call it, where the lining starts to thin because of the lack of estrogen during those times. And then we also get a miniature version of that when we're premenstrual, as women throughout the whole cycle of life, because the estrogen drops. It doesn't become atrophy, but there's just less lubrication.
And this becomes a problem though, right, Tanya? Because, don't we see lots of women with uteruses that are looking to conceive, and they're around perimenopausal years, right? It's not very uncommon. And perimenopause is very wide and varied in terms of the age when you start having it.
Right.
So, and like we know that we're delaying trying to conceive. So then as we're trying to conceive and we're kind of dry, it really sets off of like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to do this.
Right. Yeah, you're trying to make babies, but then you could be afraid to if you have any kind of history of, let's say, reoccurring bladder infections or pain with intimacy. So it's this whole, fear, which leads to more dryness, because, as we know, the biggest sex organ is our brain. And if you've got fear, you're not really going to be giving yourself that opportunity to have lubrication. But it makes sense if you're uncomfortable and you're dry and you're getting infections, and not that this process is nonstop, but it happens for some people. They get in this pattern, and then it's embarrassing to talk about, and they bring it up to their doctor, and maybe you deal with the infection, take an antibiotic for the bladder infection. But the reason it happened in the first place might be because bacteria loves that sensitive, irritated tissue. It thrives off of that. So it's trying to find the ability to cut that pattern. And part of it is working on the stress aspect and the brain and the connection and intimacy with your partner. But then it's also recognizing that it's okay to use lubricants and to make sure that you don't get any kind of damage, and that you communicate with your partner to support you to have your natural lubrication happening, even if you are, let's say, premenstrual and your estrogen is dropping.
So yeah, we're going to look at the strategies involved, but I want to just go a little deeper in terms of what you said and about fear. So in the physiology, what happens when we have fear, when someone chases you, down a dark alley? Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we're just going to pretend. And so there's a physiological response. We clench up, literally every cell of our body just contracts. So if you're wanting to invite life, like it's like, no, man, like I'm shutting down because I'm like fighting for my life. I'm running for my life.
Right.
And so we're not talking down the dark alley now, but it's just like fear of pain, fear of not being able to have a baby, fear of, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my job because I have to go to the fertility clinic? Or, it's just fears that can consume us. And that just exacerbates this condition of the dryness and this contracted energy and makes for less blood flow going down to this area because it's not necessary for survival.
Right. Just like men, in order for them to achieve an erection, they need to be in PNS mode, which means, I just thought of this, that sounded funny, like a pun, PNS, penis mode. But so PNS mode, it's parasympathetic nervous system mode, which is like the calm and relaxed mode, and not thinking about, business and all the things they have to do in order to achieve erections. So same thing for us as women, in order for us to start having the ability to feel down there and have circulation, and for our clitoris to get engorged or get the lubrication, we have to be in this calm, relaxed, less stress mode, which can be challenging if you have secondary infertility and you have kids running around already, or you're thinking about are your deadlines. And so there are strategies. I think the biggest strategy really is to get support for your stress. So better coping skills, and whether or not that means you build in time for physical treatments to kind of really teach you to kind of breathe into your heart and relax, like acupuncture, massage therapy. So physical modalities, or making space for downtime in your life so that you can then, when you're ready to be with your partner, have that moment where you're like, okay, I had moments today where I was relaxed and now I can jump back into that, because we're expecting ourselves to just be thrown into that mode. It doesn't work as effectively unless you have something that's built in constantly, that space, that time.
That's a great point, because, don't we, and what you speak to is like that therapeutic touch.
Yeah.
Because, aren't we so disconnected now? People don't touch each other anymore.
Right. Fist bumps.
Right. Exactly. Fist bumps. It's like, that's not real connection.
Right.
I miss those hugging, kissing days, right?
Yes, totally. And then even with our partners, we can become roommates, right? We're living in the same house and we're busy and we might have different bedtimes. So it's really, part of it is committing to yourself that time, but then also committing time to your partner. The biggest libido squisher would be, spending too much time in front of the TV or social media, and then of course work. So really committing to time for yourself, but also creating these little rituals with your partner. And that could be whatever you guys decide that is. It could be tea time. It could be, wrapped up, intertwined in clothes, holding each other, or making sure that you have this ritual of kissing each other before you leave if you're going physically to work every day. So these little rituals that kind of add up. And if you start letting them go, so you're not needed, don't have time. It's hard to go from, nothing to all of a sudden jump into bed together and be physically intimate and try to make babies, or just, let's say you're past that phase and you're in perimenopause, to have that, those memories and bring them back. And what I found fascinating reading on this is that if you don't, think about it or have the physical touch or, even self-pleasure, the brain that is affected by that self-pleasure or orgasms or thoughts about it, it shrinks. So that whole concept of if you don't use it, you lose it, doesn't just apply to, physical vaginal changes and dryness and atrophy. It also, your brain stops kind of building the tissue to make you think about it. And some women will say when they're postmenopausal, they'll say when they go through the hormone shift, they almost feel like the lights went out. So it's not just about hormones. It's also about the actual physical leaving it in your life and making the space for it. If you like this episode and want more, please like and subscribe and comment. It really helps us. And please share, because when you help us, motivate us, we're going to give you more juicy content. And it also helps reach a wider audience to help more people and get this really good information out there.
And I mean, surely you have friends that could be in your predicament, but aren't talking about it. So if we just gently nudge, it's makes it more comfortable, right? Let's talk about it. There's nothing wrong with it. And so you're bringing about a very important point. So those people that have a dramatic decline in estrogen, on the one hand, we can say, but that's just the course of nature. And I love what Dr. Avram Blooming said with Carol, I forget her last name.
Travis. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Where it's like, well, and they're a believer of estrogen replacement, hormone replacement for menopausal years. And, the thing is, people will say, well, but that's not natural. And I love their reply, which is, well, it's not natural that we live so long. Right. Which is like, oh, darn, that is so true.
Yes, it is. Because we don't die of infections anymore.
Yeah, right. So for all of us people here, Tanya and I included, we're really interested in natural approaches to life. And at some point, for some of us, it's like, maybe it's not a bad idea if we need to do that, if we need to consider some external source of estrogen, because actually estrogen is natural.
Yes.
When we were younger.
Yeah. We have all these years with it, and then it literally does fall off a cliff in levels. If you were to do blood assays, you would see your blood estrogen went from like 200 to 1,000 to like less than 40. And so if you have, let's say, these urogenital or this urogenital dryness, if you have this urogenital dryness, you can use estrogen replacement at a very micro dose that doesn't even impact your blood levels to restore the vaginal cells so that you don't have the dryness. Even if you don't necessarily, care about libido, maybe you're having different ways of intimacy in your postmenopausal years and you're past the point of even wanting physical penetration. That's okay too. It's also important. I mean, if 70% of women struggle with urogenital symptoms like the dryness and infections, this is a way to prevent those things. So you don't have to take antibiotics, and so you're not irritated when you're wiping. Or just have struggles when you have to go for a clinical pap exam. So I think. Oh
my gosh. Thank you for bringing this up. I have to cut in because I have to say that, I had my pap smear exam and it hurt. Like my whole life, it's never hurt. And then all of a sudden now it's hurting and I'm postmenopause. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I know for sure my tissue is different down there. Right. And of course, I would say, gosh, you guys should really warm up the speculum and, all that stuff, but I can't control what they're doing. So, and it's like, gee, next time I go in, maybe I need to give myself some self-pleasure because I'll be more relaxed down there and that there'll be more blood circulation. Right. So literally that's a strategy that's there for me for the next time in a couple of years out.
Yes. It's hard because when you're doing a pap exam as a practitioner, you're only meant to use like a little warm water, not lubrication, because it can alter the test. So those are good strategies for sure. I'm going to buy you a vibrator, Mary. Sure, you follow through.
Getting like really deep around here. Yes. Okay. We did a post a while ago and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try to get one. And I never bought one. I'm sorry. Yes. And I was going to report back to everyone, like, how did it go? And I haven't gotten it. Okay. I'm not a prude, but yet like, it's like,
no, it's, you know what? It's just one of those things where you don't practice it and the time and all that kind of stuff. And, it's an intimacy thing with self. I mean, it's a matter of priorities too, right? But not everybody, puts a lot of weight on this, or they want to, but then they're maybe not in the physical health, or there's just priorities, so everyone has their different thing. But what we do know physically for vaginal dryness, that is one thing you could do, is use a vibrator to kind of improve it. But it's not the only thing. There's many other things like reducing your stress and making sure that, you're looking at your estrogen if you're postmenopausal, or you're looking at your intimacy and making sure that, you're feeling connected and that that's not a reason for vaginal dryness in your earlier years. And men, I think that it's really important. Like if we understand that whole concept, that for them, they also need to feel heard and connected as much as we do in order to get the erection, just like we need to get the lubrication. So if you can think of that analogy, I think it might help, because all those things are important as couples.
So you know what? We're going to refer you back to an episode we did with Alison Armstrong because we spoke to this about intimacy. So just go and check that out. And she talks about like, you know, we forget about how men need to be spoken to and respected. And because, you know, they do think a little differently than we do. So check that out for sure. And I just want to add in too, when it comes to this dryness and atrophy. So in Chinese medicine, we talk about, you know, using acupuncture. So you mentioned it about for relaxation. Yes, that's super helpful, but we're also increasing blood volume downstairs. So that's really important. And then on top of that, there's also traditional Chinese medicine. So herbal medicine that we say can help lubricate and nourish the declining yin essence. So yin and yang, like you might have heard of those two terminologies. Well, the yin is the feminine energy and it controls body fluids. And as we age, it starts to decline. And so we need to supplement. And what a great way to supplement through nourishment. So in nourishment from a medicinal point of view, it's like there are herbal medicines that can be utilized to help nourish. So how about in supplementation, just off the cuff? Like, is there something that you would use and recommend for people, just more in a general sense?
Yeah, so for yin, I mean, I associate yin with estrogen. So we mentioned using estrogen, and then yin being like calm and downtime, so physically, and then herbs that support stress. So looking at perhaps even 5-hydroxytryptophan, magnesium, things that can reduce stress, or adaptogens like ashwagandha or rhodiola. So herbs that help you adapt to stress. And then food-wise, making sure that you're having, you know, good amount of like a balanced macronutrients. So getting enough protein and cholesterol. People are afraid of cholesterol because they think, oh, it's going to increase my cholesterol. But cholesterol is the precursor to all of your hormones. So making sure you do get the good fats in there and a balanced nutrient diet. And good fats like, you know, walnuts and sesame seeds for the zinc, like so tahini, for both women and men are very helpful. And then, of course, aphrodisiac foods like chocolate.
Oh, but that we're going to cover that in the next episode because we're going to go and do a deep dive about how to improve libido. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about this more. This is all juicy conversation. And I can't believe that we've revealed as much as we did. So
I know.
Don't judge us. But who cares?
Yeah, we're trying to help.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.